everybody. Thank you all for coming. I'm Kim Stokem. I'm also a clinician at Children's Mental Health in Contra Costa County, and I am the Early Intervention and CANS Countywide Lead. And much like Dr. Africa did this morning, I want to make sure to acknowledge that Contra Costa County is also on Bay Muick lands, so it is the tribal lands, and we are here as their visitors.
Hi, my name's Claire Battis. I work in the QA department of Contra Costa County Behavioral Health, and I'm supporting and helping coordinate, I help coordinate CANS implementation in Contra Costa County in October 2018. And currently we're preparing for ANZA implementation. And I just want to also take this time to give a huge shout out to Kim and Kimally for making this presentation and actually doing this training for our county staff. This training kind of emerged out of a need that we're certifying staff in the CANS 101, but it wasn't really, it was teaching people how to certify in the CANS and get certified and how to check that box off for compliance, but not really how to use it in a meaningful way. And they kind of worked together and spent a really long time developing this training for our staff to get the most use out of the CANS as they can as a clinical tool, not just for documentation. So thank you guys so much for that.
Thank you. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's find out who's here. So if you could put your name, where you're from, and your experience using the CANS in the chat, we'd appreciate that. And maybe we could just kind of say hello to some of you.
I mean, it sounds like we have over 60 people in here. So Thank you all for coming. But we still love to see who's here, what counties, countries.
Oh, nice. Tanya from LA County, a trainer of CANS. Beth Hall, Frontline Child Welfare. Hi, wow. Let's see, there are a bunch of you guys. It's kind of exciting. Keisha Montgomery, hello from Texas. Hey. Eileen. The sun, whoa, it's moving so fast. Hello. We're really happy to have you guys here. Oh, wow. This is kind of overwhelming for us too. We didn't expect to do it this way. Wow. Let's see, Donald Adams Jr., Austin Cummings. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, looks like we have a few trainers here too as well, and people that have been using the CANS for a while.
Wow, there's still people coming in too. Let's see. Use the CAN with our foster children. Leslie Walker, Logan County. Keisha Montgomery, hi. Let's see. Wow. All right, let's keep going. So our learning areas for today are introducing, explaining, and engaging youth and caregivers with CANS, incorporating the CANS in a teaming process, and using the CANS in treatment planning. And I just wanted to kind of acknowledge, we took a full day training and condensed it to 1 hour. So there's a lot you won't get out of this training that you would have gotten out of 8 hours, but we're gonna do our best to make it kind of concise and give you guys an understanding of how we use it.
And we took it virtual, so here you go. So we're going to start off with an activity. This activity, we have a vignette, and I think Claire made it available to everybody, some additional resources we're going to talk about. And so Julia is just for a point of reference, and we are going to do a role play here in just a little bit. Again, if we had done the full day, we would have been doing some group activities and things like that with the Julia vignette. So we're just going to do a little role play and really start talking about how we make meaning of the CANS, and how the CANS really kind of becomes that golden thread from the beginning of treatment throughout the treatment process. So that's involving care teams, involving different people, and really the key part is involving the child, youth, family, and caregivers in the process. So we really want to show how we've developed a conversation guide And this conversation guide actually came from the TCOM conference last year. So it was introduced to us and we brought it back to our county. One of our clinicians really converted it to our cans. Pretty easy to do. So we're giving you an example of it to make it into something. Everybody keeps talking about the check boxes of cans. So this takes away that idea of the check boxes. This really turns it into something conversational. It becomes very fluid in the process. And it really makes it something that, really makes it meaningful and that golden thread of treatment. So we are going to do this activity. And can go to the next one. With the activity, we're going to be looking at, we're not doing our entire cans and the entire conversation guide. We picked out a few areas. So we'll be talking about, with Julia as our example, the emotional behavioral needs, life functioning, cultural needs, risk behaviors, and the caregiver needs. And we'll be taking on different roles. So I'm going to be in the role of the clinician. Kimally is going to be in the role of the auntie. So she's going to be Miss Gomez, and Claire is going to be in the role of Julia. And so we're hoping that this can kind of give you an idea also how to do this virtually. So one of the things, there's several different scoring sheets or rating sheets you can use when doing the cans. I love to pick different ones based on ages and all different things, or let them pick their own scoring sheets when I'm working with youth and family. In this case, we're going to show you a window pane that actually can be up on the screen while you're doing a virtual intake. And so this will be up during our role play. So as a point of reference, this way we can talk about those scoring. Again, it's a do with, not a do for. So it's a conversation about how we're going to be doing those scores and deciding on the scores and the rating for Julia and her family. And then we'll talk to you a little bit about our conversation guide and how we use that. Okay, so hi, Miss Gomez and Julia. Thank you for coming here today. I'm Kim, and I'm going to be getting services started with you. So tell me a little bit about what has brought you here today.
Well, Julia started living with our family, and we've just noticed some things that we're really concerned about with her. I guess one of the things is normally she's generally calm and really nice to be around, but sometimes she has a really hard time expressing how she feels. She can become really agitated, angry, and a lot of times that's because she has had a lot happen to her and she doesn't like to talk about it.
Okay. So I hear you're saying there's some different emotions that come up, some anger. Julia, do you want to talk a little bit about what that's like for you?
I don't know. It's just, I guess it's just hard to talk to my aunt, especially when she raises her voice at me. And I mean, I just we just moved. I've moved so many times. I just came to America a few years ago, and then we had to move again to a new neighborhood and a new school. And all my friends are still back in my old neighborhood, so I don't get to see them as much.
That's pretty difficult. Those are some really big changes for you. Ms. Gomez, do you want to talk a little bit more about those changes and what you've seen go on for that?
Well, in school, she's not doing as well as she was doing. She used to get really good grades, and now she's not doing really well. And her friendships, she doesn't seem to have a whole lot of friendships or friends. She usually kind of follows the rules at home, but other times she'll challenge us or just ignore us altogether.
Okay.
Yeah.
So part of what we're doing today in my getting to know you and really looking at what would work best for you, Julia, and for you, Ms. Gomez, for your family, is we're doing what's called the Child and Adolescents Needs and Strength Inventory. And I have a little window pane up here. We're going to be kind of talking about doing some ratings, and these will help guide our treatment, and it also will help when we look at collaboration with other services that might support with everything that you guys have going on. If you notice, there's two different ratings here. There's the needs, and where we're going to really focus our energy is where we have needs that are around 2s and particularly the 3s. If you notice, those are the dangerous things that we really want to focus on right away. And then strengths, it goes a little differently. So there's going to be some areas where there's not strengths that we might talk about, and that's perfectly fine. But then we're also going to look at strengths we can build on. We're also going to look at strengths you're already using, and then maybe strengths that are really important to your family. And I'm already hearing some concerns in some areas. I'm also hearing some strengths. Ms. Gomez, you talked a little bit about, Julia, your school achievements in the past, and we want to look at how to support you in having those school achievements again. But right now it's a little bit of a struggle. So maybe we're going to look at some ways maybe we can partner with your school setting and help them understand how big of a change this has been for you to come to this new school. And Ms. Gomez will probably be looking at some of those concerns you had around Julia's emotional reactions and some things that have been going on. So those will be some areas of focus. Is there more that you'd like to share with me about those things?
Well, is this like a test? So like 2s and 3s, like, am I going to fail?
It's a really good question. It looks like that, doesn't it? What it really is we're going to use those scores to kind of help us gear our treatment. So something, Julia, you talked about is at school, it's a little bit difficult for you right now, and that you've changed, you've had a lot of changes, you've moved a lot. And so we want to look at, so if we, let's say we rate school as a 2 right now, that means that we together, you, your aunt, your uncle, and other people that are important to you, will look at how to start working with your school to help maybe get you some support, help things move along. So really those scores, the idea is to look at how we can maybe move those scores. So if you get a 2, let's say in school achievement right now, that's a place we're going to focus some of our treatment. And in time, the idea is that we'll work towards that score going down to like a 1. So in a lot of ways, you have a lot to do with the scoring, and you get to be part of deciding what these scores are. Were there other things you wanted me to know today about what's going on? Ms. Gomez or Julia?
Well,
go ahead, Julia.
I mean, I know like I haven't been doing so well in school, but it's just English is my second language, so it's really hard for me. And I'm like the only like Latino person in my school, and like no one really understands me, and like some of the kids, make fun of me.
Yeah, so that's a very big thing, Julia. We would really look at that cultural stress for you and what's going on there. And that would be another area we would probably rate as a 2 for you, because we want to help you find those connections in your new school and your community that you had previously before you moved, and really support you in your school setting and helping the school understand how to gear their education and their work for your needs. And Ms. Gomez, did you have some things you wanted to add?
Well, Julia mentioned that sometimes I yell at her, and I have to admit I yelled at her a couple of times. And one thing is that, I have chronic pain, and I'm not always as patient as I should be with her. But there was another day she came home intoxicated. And I remembered that earlier that day I was yelling at her. That seems to be whenever I yell at her, something seems to happen after that. I'm not really sure.
And one of the things we can do with the cans is Ms. Gomez, we can look at your needs as well. And I hear you talking about a medical need, and we would look at giving a score in that area, a rating, that we can also focus some of our energy in that as well, so that we can get you the support you need as Julia's caregiver, so that you feel like you have the resources and the knowledge to keep her safe, and to also be able to take care of yourself, because I hear your concern about the curfew and alcohol. And
yeah.
And then I saw just in the information I received, you guys went to the emergency room a couple of weeks ago with concerns of safety. Okay. That's something I think I would, if you're able to tell me a little bit about that, either one of you or both of you.
I mean, I already told all the doctors and therapists I don't want to tell my story all over again to a stranger.
I agree, Julia. I am absolutely a stranger to you, and I get not wanting to tell your story over and over again. One of the reasons we do the cans is so that we can now have this, a bit of your story. There's a lot more to your story, but a bit of your story will be held in this cans. And that's something we can share across different people who are part of your care team, so that you, Julia, don't have to continue to tell these stories over and over again. So the cans can really help these scores. It's another place we use these scores to help us guide your treatment. So thank you for telling me that. Would you be okay with your aunt telling me about what happened a couple weeks ago?
That's fine.
Thank you, Julia.
So, about 2 weeks ago, she threatened to kill herself. And so we were really concerned, and we took her to the emergency room, but they didn't keep her because they didn't feel that there was real intent to harm herself. She's been through a lot. She has nightmares and flashbacks. She was sexually abused for about 5 years and witnessed her mother being beaten up by her father. And he threatened her life quite a bit too.
So these will definitely be areas that we want to focus on with your treatment, Julia, and we want to make sure you're safe. Are you still feeling like you might harm yourself?
Not right now.
Okay.
No.
So we definitely want to do planning around that and get you the support that both of you need to keep you safe, and to make sure you're getting the treatment and the care that you need. Do you have any other questions for me today?
No, not at this time.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and move into talking about the scores. So usually, obviously, this would be a much longer process. We wouldn't do it in 10 minutes. So with Julia's vignette, we can kind of look at, so this are snapshots of our conversation guide. So again, trying not to have that idea of a checklist. So we have different questions to ask, and can really pull from the questions really what are needed and where to talk. So I didn't talk a lot about psychosis because there is no evidence of that. So I don't need to go into a whole bunch about psychosis for Julia. We kept our focus really on what is really presented for Julia at this time. So her scores, she has some impulsivity that we really want to probably put that at a 2. We want to track what's going on around that. She has some depression, so that would also be a 2. She has some anxiety that's going on, and that would be a 1. We're not really, even though her aunt spoke of some anger outbursts and things like that, she's not really fitting to have a high score in anger, but it's something we might want to look at tracking. And then definitely adjustment to trauma. She's had a lot of trauma. So we want to make sure that whatever approach is a trauma-informed approach for her. And then there's some concern about substance use. So we want to score that as a 1. So this is, the next, I would just go into these different scores. Next, we went to functional life functioning areas. And again, these are the different conversation pieces so that you're just fluidly going back and forth between the different areas. And as compared to like staying with emotional behavioral and not moving with the family and the youth, you're actually moving with them. And the conversation guide lets you do that. I can kind of hold up on my screen. Literally what I do is I just kind of like circle parts and start putting numbers as I'm talking to people. And so here again, we have some concerns in the family. So we probably would rate that a 2. We probably want to do some focus there. We want to give them some support. I would look at probably a referral to like wraparound and a peer support or family support for them. So that they can get some support in the home with what's going on. Social is a concern. She's lost her social system, although she's staying connected with friends from her old school. In her new school, she doesn't have that. School achievement has gone down. So we really want to support the school in understanding how to make Julia successful. And that's a really big key here. There's a language barrier. There's a cultural barrier. And so we need to help the school understand what Julia needs to make her successful. And then she's having some sleep challenges. Her aunt talked about nightmares and some other things. We want to track that. So that would be a 1. Then moving into risk factors. So she was talking about suicide just a couple of weeks ago. So it's going to be something we focus on. She's saying she's safe now, but I'm also a stranger to her. How much is she going to tell me? So we really want that to be a focus, to make sure she's safe and make sure her caregivers have the knowledge and information to keep her safe. And then, and again, we wouldn't go into a lot of other parts of the cans because there wasn't evidence of it. Then going into the cultural factors, there was a lot of cultural needs here. There was a big change. She came from another country. She's having to adapt to living with her aunt and uncle. She's lost a lot of her traditions, her rituals. She is still attending church, and that's a part of it, but it's a different church. It's a different community. So we have quite a bit of cultural stress. There's a language barrier. So we're definitely going to want to make this a focus of treatment. And then looking at strengths, there was a lot of strengths in there. There's a family strength that we can definitely build on. Right now, there's a lot of tension there, but we can build on it. And that's where we would probably bring in some other people, wrap around, maybe therapeutic behavioral services. I mean, there's a lot of different resources, a mentor, linking Julia to other Latinx community members that we can find, those kinds of things. Julia has some talents. We didn't get into this, but if you look on the vignette, she has some talents and interests that she uses as coping skills. So we really want to build from those. Spiritual and religious, that's very important to the family and their cultural identity. So we really want to build off of those. Right now, Julia's resiliency is pretty low. So we want to really support her and get her more resilient, get her more coping skills. And so we have natural supports to build on and community life that we want to build on. And then we looked at also what does the caregiver need? Because we never want to leave out that caregiver. It's so important. Ms. Gomez really talked about some need for knowledge. She needs to know more about what's going on for Julia. She has some medical needs. So that's something we really have to look at. And then supervision, that definitely came up. So one of the things that, and I didn't do it in the role play, so I made a little mistake there, but definitely talking about the COUNS is going to be updated over time. Usually when Julia asks me about the test, I say that, so I didn't there, so sorry. but that the cans will be updated over time, and also that the cans will change over time. And as new people join, they will be part of those cans ratings. So those are some snippets of our conversation guide and how we kind of move fluidly in that process. So how do we make it meaningful? So we really want them to understand the CAN scores. Julia asked a really good question there, like, oh, I'm being tested, what is this? And I don't know, for those of you who have done this, how often that has come up. So really, reinforcing that these scores are something that we're hoping, now Julia doesn't have to keep telling her story over and over again. We're going to have these CAN scores, and we're going to show you a little bit how to make these CANs throughout treatment, into teaming processes, and then into like vision statements, so that this becomes that golden thread throughout her treatment and making meaning of her treatment across systems, and that Julia and her family feel like they have empowerment as part of this.
Kim, I just wanted to stop for a minute because we're getting questions in the chat, and one I'm noticing, someone was asking about the role of sleep, and we rated it a 1, and I think Claire clarified it that we were not so clear if it was impairing, if there was a functional impairment or not. So it would be a 1 until we do further assessment to find out how she's being affected. But I think when you say nightmares and flashbacks, it kind of implies that it might be a 2. So I kind of wanted to put that out there because once the person said that, I thought, yeah, it could be a 2. So
could be a 2.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about the CANs. Nothing is just written in stone. We have conversations and we interact about it, and kind of, we'll get to that about the teaming process. But anyway, so including the youth in a meaningful way, we'd ask a few questions, and you can answer this in the chat. Why might it be difficult or uncomfortable to include the youth in conversations about his or her CAN scores? If you guys could just kind of say why you think that could be an issue. And then what are the benefits of including youth in the conversation? And let's see, I don't know, you guys can put in your answers in there, or I can just tell you what we thought. And how can providers make difficult conversations with youth more comfortable? Right, new relationships, still building trust.
And somebody put in there doing the CANs every 6 months. Definitely, doing it on a regular basis and updating if new information, like the sleep one. If we get more information on how that's impacting her during her school day, then we're going to make those changes and have that conversation with Julia and her aunt and, anyone else who's part of that care team.
Let's see. Sarah said youth may feel labeled by scores.
Yep.
So it's better to, uncomfortable when there is disagreement, but benefits of transparency. You want the youth to buy in, so that's why it's moving fast. I'm sorry, you guys. I can't get
Lots of good ideas, though, and good questions.
So we saw in the Julia role play that the therapist did ask Julia's permission to talk with her aunt about the difficult subjects. The therapist respectfully did this, Kim. But what if Julia did not want the subject brought up? Like, how would you deal with that?
Yeah, so that's really good. And I do always ask. And in the event Julia said, no, I don't want to sit here while I'm talked about, which happens at least half the time, if not more. Then I would, ask, can I talk to your aunt at a later date, and she can tell me about it. And then, and again, Julia is part of that. That's a really important piece of it. Is this, again, we're not doing this assessment on a family. They're doing it with us. They're part of it. So I would want to ask Julia, can I talk to your aunt at a later time about it? And usually, most times, youth have been okay with that. They're like, sure, I just don't want to be there. And, on our virtual platform, I make a date for a phone call, or the youth leaves. When we do it in person, the youth can leave the room and I can still talk with the parent or guardian. So that way we can definitely make them part of it and they get to decide. I mean, we need the information. It's important because we're not going to get those accurate scores, but we have to be really respectful of what this young person has been through.
Kim, there are a couple questions, but related to that, someone asked, what if the youth says no again, the young person doesn't want you talking to anyone else about them? What would you do?
Yeah, we'd have to do our best to respect that. I mean, the aunt can pipe in and say, well, I took her to the emergency room because she tried to kill herself. And then we just have to deal with that in the moment. You know, some of that information I'm going to already have. We're on electronic records. It's in there. So I always want to hear it as much as possible from the youth and family, because that's them telling their story of what happened, not the medical piece that comes up on my electronic records. So,
which is why we said, what is the benefit of including the youth in the conversation? We want to empower them so that their voice is heard, so that we're not just going by what the court report says or what the social worker said or what a friend said. We want to really hear what the youth has to say, because a lot of times their voice isn't heard. And so we hope with the CANs we're able to give them a voice and really respect what it is that the information that they're giving us.
Thank you for all these great questions and comments, y'all. I wish I could read them quick enough.
And then someone asked if we do the CANs as part of our mental health psychosocial assessment. And yes, we do. We have the CANs embedded into our initial and annual assessments. And then they do a standalone CANs for the 6th month.
Mm-hmm. And we can update it at any time it needs updating. Okay.
So Claire, let's go to the next one.
So engaging, I mean, we've kind of already gone over this in this conversation, which is, you know, being in virtual, I always am like, I'm missing seeing people in person and that back and forth, but y'all are doing it in the text. So thank you. But yeah, really engaging, really having that conversation, how you review the CANs, how you talk about the scores. That would have been the next role play, or we would have had y'all do it in groups, but this is way too big to break up into breakout rooms. But really looking at those scores and how we're going to use them. So then those next conversations about, you know, with these scores, we're looking at maybe that referral to wraparound and peer support, maybe looking at a mentor or a community member for Julia and the Latinx community. Just looking at those different ways we can support and engaging them as part of the process is just really important. Go on to the next one.
So incorporating the CANs in a teaming process. Move to the next one. So teaming, the combined expertise of all involved in treatment, from the social worker, the therapist, attorney, community-based providers, important extended family members, the family and the child, is integrated to deliver seamless, comprehensive care within a context that is culturally sound and secure for the youth and family. A successful management of the team includes effective communication, managing team emotions and stability, because, you know, we're not going to agree usually, but we have to remain emotionally collected and stable. We need to maintain and build trust and respect, incorporate humor for the rough patches because it gets hard, addressing conflict constructively and respectfully, and facilitating team building.
So now, I mean, these are the TCOM piece that some of you might be familiar with or very, very familiar with, but we just wanted to have that in here because, again, the CANs is that transformational piece, looking at how we can do change over time and where we're going to gear our treatment. Because being a clinician for many, many years, there were times when we came up with wonderful treatment and it just was not on the mark. And we would do it for quite a while and we were just not on the mark. And so the CANs really helps guide us from the beginning. And with teaming, if we're teaming with wraparound or child and family team, or other ways we're looking at that care team, we're able to work together from shared need, from a need that they've identified, the family's identified, and that we've agreed upon was going to be our focus. And that's that collaborative piece. We can also look at the measures. The measures help us statewide, but also countywide. Where are gaps? Where are we missing things? Something that we brought in Contra Costa County recently is a lot more mentors, because that was a place we were missing. We were really missing that youth needed mentors. And so we were able, based on that need, that gap, to look at, okay, we can have more mentors. So it's ways to find it. It can go all the way up the system, what is needed. And then the last piece of it is the management. How can we help programs change based on these scores and based on what's needed? So although we're doing our scores organically with the youth and family and caregivers, we're also looking at how those scores can help all the way up. So help with funding, help with new programs, help with changing programs. We've seen huge changes in how long youth are in things like residential care, because we saw that that wasn't the most effective way for youth being in outside care. So trauma-informed practices, all of those are part of that TCOM, and that's such an important part of the CANs.
So public systems are complex human systems. So our system of care is really complex, lots of moving parts, well-intentioned people, but we have to kind of work together. So it's necessary to integrate these moving parts for effective system functioning. We need people to get together, and the way we do that is by having a common purpose or a shared vision. And we do that by working together and coming up with that shared vision to kind of drive the treatment.
So again, that engagement, that collaboration. I mean, we're really kind of pushing the teaming part. And I just, the one I went to before this, and some of you were in there, was the wraparound in CANs. So important. Wraparound is based on, some very specific principles, very specific needs, and this should all cross over. If there's needs that are identified in wraparound, those needs should also be in the treatment plan and the care plan. So again, that idea of one CANs for one youth, child, family, caregiver, and looking at how that all can come together, that golden thread, that making meaning of it. And again, that saves Julia from having to tell her story over and over again, and being able to demonstrate that collaboration for the youth and family. And I saw there's a question about embedding CANs in the assessment and initial assessments. That's a big question. I'm wondering at Claire's, because Claire was such a big part of this. So that might be something, Ellen, that offline we can talk about that process. Because I think that's a big question, but it's a good question. And I love how it's embedded in our intake and our assessments. And all of our narratives that we write, our partnership plan for wellness, all of that, the CAN scores are all part of it. Okay. So it's a very important part. Okay. Go on to the next one. So many good questions. My gosh, I wish this was a longer training.
So using the CANs in treatment planning. So now we're gonna put it all into context. So we use the CAN scores and the following tools in our next slide to create a list of the relevant needs and strengths. So we'll list the caregiver's strengths from those items that could be considered strengths or resources for the individual. Then we'd list the caregiver's needs. Then we'd list the client's strengths, and then list the client's needs. So we'll keep going.
Okay, so this is another tool that we made available for y'all. This is something, again, we can use across care teams. It's a really nice visual. And again, you can use it virtually, which is really nice because you could be having a team meeting and have this up. And this gives you a place to talk about, and we did it in a way, strengths are first, because we always want to come from a place of strengths.
Strengths. Mm-hmm.
And then needs, actionable needs. What are we going to work on? What are we going to work on in our treatment? What are we going to work on in our care teams? What are we going to work on our bigger teaming process? So this is a really nice way of bringing together, whether it's a CFT or wraparound, whatever additional services you bring in place, this is a way to bring it together. So this is the example one. And then what we did is we put Julia's scores in. So if you look, we start with where the strengths lie and where we can pull from those. So for Julia and her family, we saw that there's cultural identity. That's the centerpiece strength for them. Talents and interests. Julia uses creative writing and reading as a coping skill. So that's an interest that we can really use that. We can help with the education system to gear more stuff to her where her strengths lie. So that's a strength we can really build on. The family has a strong spiritual and religious community that they're a part of, and that's been very anchoring for them. And that's another really strong strength. And they have natural supports. We didn't touch on that in our role play, but it's in the vignette. Places we're going to build. We're going to build on the family strengths. There was lots of family strengths. It's just right now there's a lot of tension too. That community life. Julia had a very rich community life with the Latinx community before she came to this new area. We really want to build on that for her. Resiliency. Right now, resiliency is really low for her. And that's a place we want to build that up. We want to help her get those coping skills. And then those actionable needs. So those historical questions, those yes, no's, we do want those documented here because they're not going to go away and it's important to the treatment planning. So we want to look at the sexual abuse. So that's a yes. And then disruption in caregiver and attachment. That's a yes as well. And then where we're looking at really focusing our energy is family functioning. There's some real tensions in the family. Social functioning. Julia has lost her social network in this new community, and we want to support her in getting that worked up again. School achievement. This is a big one that she talked quite a bit about. There's some concern around impulsivity, not really hyperactivity, but she has some impulsive behaviors. Depression, and suicide risk, and then adjustment to trauma. There was talk of nightmares and her not wanting to talk about things. So we really want to look at her adjustment to trauma and looking at probably a trauma-informed treatment approach to work with Julia and her caregivers. And then actionable needs for the caregivers. Supervision, there's some concerns about curfew, there's concerns about safety and taking care of her, and their knowledge of just how to raise a young person who's been through what Julia's been through. Their social resources, they've also moved. They've also adjusting to this new community. So we want to support them in that way. And then looking at ways we can support Aunt's medical needs. She talked a lot about how that's impactful to the relationship. So this is a way we would take what we got from that role play and turn it into a nice guide of what's going on for Julia that we could share across the different services and care team, just the way I did with all of you. And that saves Julia from having to tell her story over and over again.
So developing a shared vision, the way you're going to do that is by identifying the family's primary concerns, needs and hopes for the client and the family. Identify the client's primary concerns, needs and hopes for themselves and the family. Identify the individual team members' primary concerns, needs and hopes for the client and family, and come to a consensus on the primary concerns, needs and hopes for the client and family from everybody. So the shared vision statement could look like this. For Julia to acquire the support she needs to manage her mood symptoms, be successful in school, and connect socially to her Latinx community. For Julia's family to obtain the knowledge that they need to support Julia and keep her safe. So that would be an example of what a shared vision statement would look like. Sorry, Kim.
No, all good.
And so move on to the next one.
So Claire gave us a little shout out in the beginning. Claire is the person that does these amazing graphs and really kind of holds us all together as the CANS training team in Contra Costa County. And she does amazing things like this.
Yeah.
And so many other things. So a little shout out to Claire for putting this together.
Shout out to Claire. Okay, so ensuring progress to what's next. Identify and monitor benchmarks. We will monitor the benchmarks to alert the team on the things that are working and the things that are not working. So that's where we'll change the treatment plan as we move and change the rating scores as we move. Be willing to make the changes to the treatment plan. Continue to update the plan as necessary and be willing to change them before compliance requires us to do it. So we're gonna stay on top of it and make sure that we're interacting with the team, with the family, and changing those scores as we need to, or eliminating goals altogether if they're no longer necessary. Plans, if they're no longer necessary. Develop the child use toolkit, what worked and didn't work, and then supporting the change, and then making sure we identify what supports changes in our youth. Because sometimes we don't tell them, like, we don't see depression for a period of time, and we don't know what's going on because we're not communicating. So we want to really be active in understanding, like, what's supporting that change? Why is this child not, reporting as many issues with being depressed or staying in or not being around friends? So we want to do that, and we want to make sure we support the family all the way through. And of course, we want to celebrate the successes. So.
And then just before and there's lots of questions, so we want to have time for that, but just the CAN scores for the needs and strengths, they just support the diagnosis to begin with. It really helps us really hone in on a really good diagnosis that we're going to work from. It also supports in the teaming process. It helps us know, if we need a team, but also sometimes clients come to us with a team like a CFT team or other teams already in place. And it can really help with that process and help if anybody's been part of teaming. Often people are coming from different perspectives, and it can kind of hone in those perspectives into these are the scores and these are the needs, and everybody's voice is heard in that process. And so that can really help. And that coming up with a shared vision statement, we were able to kind of look at her scores and say, okay, here's a vision statement. That vision statement is something that helps all of us, particularly the professionals, stay focused on what we're doing and why we're here and why we're part of this care team. And then also the scores can support the transition of services. When those scores start to change, we have a lot more ones from 2s and 3s. We know that we can start talking about what are the transitions. And, I've never met a family, well, I've met families that wanted to keep us around a little bit longer, but usually they're trying to get rid of all of us professionals. And so this can help us start having, have those conversations. Scores are changing. We can start having those changes. So now we can look at some of the questions. There's quite a few. I wanted to go up to, oh, did it go away? Somebody, and I would, Susan was concerned about the suicide attempt and making sure you get a safety plan needed. Absolutely. There is no question that if I was doing an actual intake, that would be one of the things that before they left that day or they left virtually, there would be a safety plan in place. If Julia didn't want to be a part of that, then I would do it with Aunt and ask whether Uncle's available to be a part of it. But there would definitely, and I would explain that to Julia that we have to keep her safe and that we would definitely do a safety plan. And I only asked like one little question about, oh, how do you feel now? And she's like, I'm fine. There would be a lot more questions. Right. So a lot more questions than that, but in the use of time, and we were trying to get a lot of information in that little snippet of a role play, but definitely that would be part of it. And I know there's some other questions. It moves so quickly. If people want to put any new questions in, or just raise your hands and we can even unmute and talk. But we have a little more time left to address questions. I'm going to try to scroll up and see if I see any more. Or any hand raises or anything. Sorry. This is the challenge with the virtual space, that somebody's worried about the code. You'll get the code soon. That's what happens when you give people games. Yeah, and Claire went ahead and put our information in there about how to reach out to find out more about embedding the cans into your assessment process. It really makes a huge difference doing it that way. It makes it easier to use the conversation guide, because I think before we had it embedded into our electronic records, I felt more pressure to make sure I checked every box. So now with it being, in the electronic records in that way, the conversation guide fits really nicely with it. So I don't feel so much pressure to like go through every single CANS item, even if it, again, Julia, why would I ask her about psychosis? There's no psychosis relevant there. So, so that is very helpful.
Did anyone want to have any experiences that they want to share, or things that they've found helpful when, work using the CANs with like families and youth and caregivers?
I can share one quick thing. This was about the youth not wanting to share the information. So whenever I had a youth that would be really reluctant to share something, I always would check in just to see if it had something to do with her safety. So if it was just something that maybe she broke a rule in the house and she didn't want to get in trouble, versus is it something that could have either harmed you or did harm you? Even if you didn't give me the details, can you just tell me that and then explain that, we really want to make sure that we can be there to help protect her however we can. And even if she can't share the details, can he or she just say, were they hurt? Was there potential for being hurt? Did somebody do something to you? Like those kind of just general questions. And then maybe after you do that, they're more willing to share, or maybe at least if you find out, well, yes, somebody did hurt them or they did try to hurt themselves, then you know that you have to do something more with that.
Yeah, and the one of the ways we have in our conversation guide, I mean, it's a pretty blunt question, but it's, do you currently or have you ever had thoughts of killing yourself? Now, again, if this isn't a concern for the youth, I wouldn't necessarily ask that question right off the bat. But given that I had the information that she had been to our psychiatric emergency 2 weeks earlier, I'm definitely going to ask around that. And then the follow-up question to it is, have you ever acted on that? So, lots of young people, lots of people in general do have thoughts of killing themselves at some time in their lives, but have you ever acted on it? What was the next thing? So the conversation guide really is able to give you those questions in a fluid way, like you're talking about, Roxanne. And I'm sure many of you on here, because I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces and a lot of very seasoned folks who know, but having those conversation starters really helps you guide into it. And yes, there are times when young people are like, nope, I'm not talking. But most of the time you can get there.
I think the guide's great. I love it.
I do too. And again, our coworker, Jennifer Bergman, I don't know if she's on here, but she's the one who really spearheaded bringing, we brought it back and we talked about it, and then she's like, we're going to adapt it. And so she was able to make it work and you can make it work with any cans you're using, whatever kind of cans you're doing. whatever scores are important in your area, your communities, you can make it work. And that was a wonderful thing we got last year at the conference. Looks like
safety planning, a comment that was made too that we found. I know we use the cans quite a bit, and I really like using the cans, and we're using it more and more as we're learning. But when it comes to the safety planning, that's part of our process, is that we have to do a crisis or a safety plan. And we do like to use the youth voice. Sometimes it is a really difficult subject for them to talk about, but we go in with the empathy and say, hey, I really need your voice. Because a lot of times, if you were just to take the aunt or the uncles, they may say, well, this is what might work, but it's actually a trigger for the youth.
Right.
So I really like having the youth's voice, even if I have to have 2 separate meetings. So the youth will say, yeah, if this gets said to me, or if this happens, it's a trigger and I'm going to get really upset and I may hurt myself. Mm-hmm. So I really value having the guardian's voice, but I really value having that youth voice too, because sometimes they can be completely opposite.
Yeah. And I again, doing this for a long time, there's times when I developed these amazing safety plans based on not getting the youth's voice, and they failed. I mean, it was triggering, or it made things worse. It's so important to really make sure if we can have the youth part of it, and it can take some time. Why the heck are they going to tell us everything? They've just met us. So it can take time, but definitely the more they can tell us what works, like in this case, Julia, writing and reading works for her. That's going to be part of the safety plan. That's going to be part of how we talk about how to calm her. Her aunt might be triggering her. They've only been together a short amount of time. They don't know. I mean, it's her aunt, but they haven't lived together. They're getting to know each other. Aunt's voice might trigger her. Aunt in pain probably for sure triggers her because she saw her mom in pain. So, those are all things that we want to take into account that maybe they're not thinking of. And those were the things that Julia would tell us. Oh, so, okay. Somebody just asked people who are resistant to the cans. So our county was in California, one of like the last cans counties, quite honestly, because there was like a overriding another assessment. And one of the things we learned is we got people certified, because everybody had to be certified. But then the cans, the way that people were doing the cans is they would do these amazing assessments, fantastic people doing amazing work every single day. And the cans was something they did separately in their office alone without the youth, family. And I think a lot of cans started that way. And so we went around and actually just did like these little informal interviews of our staff and said, hey, how are you doing the cans? And they're like, oh, well, I meet with people and I do it in my office after. And so we're like, okay, that's when we developed this training, is we need people to understand the importance of it being meaningful, being something that you're doing with, not for. And like the window pane and the conversation guide. Look, there's your word. The window pane and the conversation guide are now actually in our physical intake packets. And then we showed you how we use them virtually at this time. So those things are now part of our intake packets that have all our informing information and everything we need to give to parents so that we don't forget that they're supposed to be a part of it. I like to use different scoring sheets because I like them to be able to pick. I bring a basket in and they pick theirs. That's the kind of a first step of them being part of the process, is they get to pick their scoring sheets. So people pick all different ones. We've got animals, we've got dinosaurs, we've got pretty calligraphy, we've got all different ones. So it does take some time to help, I think, really helping your team know that it helps guide treatment. It's not just another assessment. It's not an assessment. Doing this work in California for a long time, we've had a couple different assessments come and go. And it might be the same in other states. I keep saying countries, states. so people are resistant to it, but I don't think CANS isn't going anywhere. It's been around for a long time. Some other states have been using it a lot longer than California. And I think just really supporting the team, as the gentleman did this morning, talking about how to support from the top down folks feeling like they can do the work, and supporting them in knowing how much it can help your treatment. That's the part of really helping with resistance. But that's one of the reasons we did this training, making it meaningful. How do you use it in treatment planning? How do you use it in teaming? How do you use it across care teams? But it's very difficult. So I hope I answered your question. And it's going too fast that now I can't see your name, and I hate that. Okay. Jenna, Cocoa County. And we're over time. Thank you all for staying over. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming today.
Yep, thank you. We hope we see you all tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.